What happens when you take an all-star roster of Doom modding talent, smush them together into a team, and task them with creating an original retro FPS title that takes advantage of the myriad bells and whistles available to them, courtesy of the GZ Doom engine? You get Supplice. To give you the elevator pitch of Supplice, all you need know is that a prosperous space colony simmering with tension between corporate interest and workers' rights has fallen to forces way beyond its reckoning. Aided by the somewhat dubious assistance of the last operational colony AI known as Charon, it's now up to you to fight through the mutated horde, past alien invaders, and hopefully reunite and regroup with any survivors still left alive on this increasingly hostile planet. Not kidding about that all-star roster of development talent, by the way. To name but a few, we have the likes of Pillow Blaster, Mechadon, Cage, Bouncy, and Zaza, accompanied by the musical stylings of the singular James Paddock and Essel Fortium. If these names don't mean all that much to you, don't worry. It just means that Supplice is going to have a really hard time being anything less than premium-grade Boomshoot. That promise of quality is pretty much apparent as soon as the action kicks off here in opening level Halifax Station. A few things certainly hit me right off the bat. Firstly, holy moly, that soundtrack. When it comes to the subject of setting the mood, Supplice does it with a track that instantly makes you want to get moving and grooving while simultaneously eviscerating enemies with your sole available weapon, the pile bunker. I'll be honest, while the primary on this thing does an admirable job of dealing close-range damage, it is absolutely nothing in comparison to its secondary, a function which punches a straight-up concussive wave that is fantastic for dealing with crowds, but also outright jibs the occasional mutant caught within the radius. The pile bunker will be a close friend throughout the majority of this first third or so of level, a winding trip around the dig site at the behest of aforementioned AI Charon in search of an armory where you can boost your chances of survival. What separates the flow of Supplice here from your average GZ Doom Megawatt, however, is the presence of terminals. These come in a few flavors. Some will have you communicating directly with Charon or other characters in order to further your journey through a given level, whilst others will give you fascinating insight into the goings-on and the people of the Methuselah colony. Sometimes these will be delivered in the forms of comm logs, journal entries, even network-wide messages from notable people in charge, and honestly, they do a fantastic job of making this place feel more than just a sequence of lavishly designed places to do battle within. Which is all the more admirable when you realize that for the entirety of this available episode, I'm pretty sure you never ever meet a single character face to face. Wheeling back to those lavishly designed levels, you may be surprised to learn that in this opening episode of Supplice, there are only 5. Pretty sure there's a secret one kicking around in there somewhere, but regardless, you shouldn't take that to mean that this is going to be a disappointingly short experience. These levels are large. First level, Halifax Station, for example, could easily be divvied up into several levels all their own, as you journey up through the mines, battle through ground level, and then gain access to the station building above. There's just a dizzying degree of mapping mastery going on here within Supplice. Each level looks just clean as heck in terms of texture work, and it's dizzying in a sense that while there's so much of it to enjoy, you'll also occasionally feel the need to go squint at the auto map, an activity that, to its credit, Supplice actively encourages and aids with some useful map pointers. What with how just girthy this opening level proves to be, by the time you hit second map, the Emerald Loop, you'll have not only seen a fair share of the monster roster, including this nightmarish, roided out monstrosity, but you'll also have gotten your hands on a few other ranged weapons in the form of 1, the assault rifle, and 2, the rotary shotgun. If I'm going to be honest, for all its pleasing chunkiness, I'm not sure the assault rifle, even with its zoom-in burst fire alt, really comes into its own until you actually get 2 of them. To give you a sense of how it feels, it's almost like the jump between using a pistol on enemies to the chain gun. The rotary shotgun, in comparison, is pretty neat. An effectively punchy primary, but oh, what is that? A triple barrel secondary? Yup, sure is. That's the good stuff right there. Interesting trade-off, however, if you choose to use that secondary on a more regular basis. It's got quite the reset time when it cycles those barrels around for another blast, so if you do whiff a shot with it, it could potentially leave you wide open to attack. But in terms of how these weapons complement each other through the course of combat, you'll find that even though you have access to these ranged weapons, you'll find that the pile bunker still gets a third degree of usage, especially when things get a little too close for comfort, even more so when swarmed, and actually proves a nice alternative when you'd rather be saving on ammunition for bigger, beefier enemies. Speaking of which, the Emerald Loop introduces yet another enemy to the mix in the form of, Anyway, the Emerald Loop in of itself is a astoundingly lovely looking map. Extra points for this just centerpiece tree in this open area towards the earlier part of the level that distracted me so much in terms of trying to appreciate it that I'm pretty sure it just outright got me killed several times. Emerald Loop also features an interesting choose-your-own-path section here where you can go one of two ways and progress onwards without having to deal with the other. That said, I did both anyway. One is demonstrably a bigger pain in the ass than the other. In that regard, I'm going to take this opportunity to say, f*** these things in particular. I'm pretty sure they're called hive teeth, and they largely seem to be the product of the thought of what if we made Lost Souls more irritating. After battling through the back half of the Emerald Loop, which could easily have stood as its own contained level, again, these levels are, to say very much the least, large, we arrive at Outpost Ramada. This one will be familiar to any of you that have played the demo version of Supplice, mainly because this was the featured level. It's nice to note at this point that each subsequent level during the course of Supplice has its own particular thing going on, at the very least visually. Not just different color palettes, but also different materials, different usages for the actual buildings and locations that you're traveling through, giving a sense that these places were actually for something other than blasting away at mutants. As for Outpost Ramada, it does exist at a pretty plot significant juncture, so if you feel like remaining ignorant of the developments here, feel free to jump on over to the timestamp currently on the screen. As for the rest of you, this is where we learn that Charon, the research AI with a strange, macabre sense of humor, is actually shockingly bad at differentiating mutated colonists from non-mutated colonists, making the whole conceit of Outpost Ramada being a safe haven for survivors kind of contentious. In effect, this is a level where the action most certainly kicks up a notch, and as a result caused me to butt up against the difficulty ceiling for having chosen to play on hard. A core memory of this playthrough certainly involves me being locked in this room with what seems like a dozen roided out mutants, continuously pummeling me to death with a precious little opportunity to actually squeeze through. I did so eventually through sheer bloody self-determination, but man, for a minute things felt like they were getting a little out of my control. Happily, however, Outpost Ramada compensated my misery, what with the acquisition of the, quite frankly, awesome-sounding Cyclomortar. Primary fire shoots out a flaming projectile on an arced trajectory, dealing a fair amount of damage on impact, whereas the secondary is a charge fire that, when unleashed, not only increases the impact of the primary projectile, but also sends various bouncing secondary projectiles around the immediate area. I'm a fan. Another notable occurrence during the course of Outpost Ramada occurs towards the frantic, overwhelming end of level fight, where you'll also acquire the Overflow Sphere, not only granting you a ridiculous amount of armor and health, but also overcharging your pile bunker. If you thought it was pretty handy before, well, how about a concussive flame wave that can also set enemies on fire? There's a lot to like about follow-up and penultimate map, Urbex. First of all, love the music. Second of all, don't mind the environment either, even if it does take a turn for the more decidedly urban. It's the title, I guess. It's open, explorable, and largely it revolves around an effort to reach the controls that'll allow remaining colonists to escape safely. Story-wise, things here are trucking along nicely, a fair degree of intrigue peppered throughout the logs, journals, and conversations at various terminals, things that I won't go into too much detail on, but as I've said before, provides a really nice bit of meat that just continuously serves to enhance that underlying framework of already rock-solid level design and gameplay. But yeah, many meaty encounters to be enjoyed during the course of Urbex, not to mention the addition of a fresh monstrosity in the form of whatever the unholy heck this thing is. It's big, tanky, and when within range, appears to chuck a projectile flail of sorts in your general direction. Generally inspires panic whenever I see it, especially when it's coupled with pretty much any other enemy in the same area. While I'm at it, I've got a fresh complaint about the hive teeth. The eggs that spawn them. F those things as well. They take too long to kill. They suck. Final map, Flux, is one heck of a doozy, to say the least. Revolving around a facility housing the eponymous Flux Gate, you have to first fight your way through the opening car park, and then nibble around the edges before getting to the creamy center. That's a weird analogy. Why did I... Either way, this is a fantastic and densely layered level, where that aforementioned nibbling around the edges encompasses multiple sub-locations, from the car park to a subterranean car park structure, to the sewers underneath, to the more technical guts of the facility, before leading you on a merry fight around a quite pleasingly designed lobby. Well, if it wasn't for all the things trying to kill you in the process of getting through it. Sticking your nose into every nook and cranny here is also very much emphasized, doubly so if you want to find yourself well stocked up for the final encounter. Something that I found I unfortunately wasn't during the course of my hard mode run. Not entirely sure whether that was a case of just irresponsible ammo expenditure on my part, or maybe some greater overarching balance issues on hard difficulty. Either way, it's well worth seeking out an ammo cache attained by usage of the green key back in that underground parking structure. Very easy to miss if you're not aware of it or if you're not looking for it, but I think regardless of the difficulty, it's going to be pretty handy to have on hand. So, how about that final encounter? Well, firstly, you're going to have to take into account that I was playing this on hard, and I was suffering a few issues that may or may not have been self-inflicted, but I feel like it could have been a bit more. For one, the previously excellent soundtrack swaps out for something that I'm not sure entirely is befitting of an ultimate end-of-episode encounter. And as for the big kahuna itself, which finally appears after waves of enemies spawn out of the Flux Gate, I thought it would be taller. I know, very much a nitpick, but hey, it makes up for the height deficiency with very much Short King boss-style energy, because, man, spend too long in direct line of sight of that thing and you are getting minced. And that's even with access to the minigun, which caps out the roster of weapons for this particular episode. It's got some interesting alt abilities, namely that of turning it into a turret, and that actually can be multiplied because, in effect, every new minigun you pick up can also be deployed as a new turret. Comes very much in handy for taking down those waves of enemies that spawn during this fight, and, yeah, quite instructive, come to think of it, when it comes to the capabilities of the weapon. Just a shame that, at least on my hard difficulty playthrough, there was some sort of balance issue. Again, not sure if that's self-inflicted, but on the multiple attempts I gave it, that boss was just entirely too tanky compared to the amount of ammunition I had to hand. Just ended up being oddly deflating. But all things considered, I need to remember that this is merely the end of episode 1. So if it does stumble somewhat at this very, very final juncture, in my personal opinion, there's still an absolute mountain of quality preceding it that honestly makes me pretty damn excited to see what the Supplice team have in store for subsequent episodes. Naturally, this brings me round to the elephant in the room. This is, of course, an early access release of something that people are typically accustomed to getting for free. There's certainly been a big paradigm shift as of late when it comes to creations made using the GZ Doom engine, and personally, I'm all for it. Now, some may balk at the prospect of paying for just one episode in early access with Supplice, but to me, it's giving my seal of approval. It's me tacitly saying that yes, more of this please, and I trust you to deliver. If anything has been proven by recent releases of games developed using GZ Doom, it is that it is tremendously versatile and capable of providing some real great experiences. A fusion of old school with new techniques, new ideas. I feel like this should be more than encouraged. In any case, I'll freely admit, I do have a little bit of bias on this front. And at the end of the day, it's entirely up to you what you do with your own money. You could experience Supplice as it is now, or you could wait till the full release. I'm not going to judge you, but I will tell you, Supplice is pretty damn friggin' good, and I genuinely trust the pedigree of the team behind it. So yeah, any irks, any problems that I have with it right now, and trust me, they are vanishingly few, I'm pretty sure that they'll be well and truly ironed out by the time full release comes a-calling. In any case, I hope you've enjoyed this jaunt through the early access release of Supplice. Very happy with what I've seen so far, and it's just nice to see this project finally come to some sort of fruition after many, many moons of watching it from the sidelines. To be honest, all I want now is an OST release. Give me that soundtrack, damn it! But until next time, this has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.